Hello everyone, welcome back to Pencils and Lipstick. This is episode 237, and I am Kat Caldwell, the hostess of the show. Today we are going to talk about the beginning of our novels and how to find that perfect beginning that will bring the reader into our world and keep them reading. I started thinking about this because there are so many competitions out there for best first line and critique groups where you send in your first chapter and we'll critique it and see if it's, compelling enough for us. There's a lot of talk in the writing world about the first pages, and it's not for nothing. The first pages are rather crucial. They are what will keep your reader reading. Of course, you do have to have enough intrigue there. But I was taking a class, a writing class, The Art of Storytelling, and they were interviewing Mark Hurwitz. I think that's how you say it. Hurwitz. He's a thriller writer, but he's also written movies, screenplays, comics, things like that. So well-rounded writer. And he was talking about how the beginning of the story should be seen, in his point of view, like a social contract between the writer and the reader, in which the writer is setting before the reader sort of this introduction into the story, and they are setting up this contract of what the reader is to expect. Now, a little side note to that, when the reader reads the blurb and then decides to buy the book, that blurb should match the beginning of the book, right? And so what I was thinking about through that idea of a social contract, of introducing the reader to the writer, how the writer writes, how the writer develops their characters, whether they start right away in action or if they give some background. This is kind of that setup, right? That first introduction, which means that there technically is no perfect way to start your novel. What would be the perfect way to do it is the way in which the reader accepts your introduction, sort of your handshake, your social contract, and keeps turning pages. Of course, you can break that contract by kind of not keeping up with it as the writer, right? So this idea of a perfect beginning has a bit to do with the genre that you are writing in. So the contract that you are working on with the reader also has to sort of pertain to the genre contract with the reader as well. So you definitely need to know your genre, right? Which is not anything new to us. But this idea that you're going to be able to send off your beginning novel to a writing critique group and get feedback that is well-rounded and helpful is low. I'm going to say that. I think it's low because in the end, there is a sort of, what a reader finds digestible, which changes per reader. It can change per the mood of the reader. It changes by what type of book they typically read. And so in your critique group, unless you are amongst people who read and write the same genre, even still, they might not like certain beginnings. That is not to say that all is lost and we can't find compelling beginnings. Clearly we can, because there are hundreds of thousands of books out there, and books that we all love and books that we've gotten through. Now, we've all read those books where we started out, and the only reason we went on is because we complained about it to somebody and they said, no, just keep going. It gets better. I think we kind of want to avoid being that writer, more or less. Now, again, this can all depend on sort of the mood or the life moment of that reader. Of course, all of that can depend on it, right? But what we're going to talk about today is this, keeping in mind the social contract with the reader. So we are going to present, let's say, you're writing historical romance. Well, you're going to probably start it out with the main character doing something, right? To sort of introduce who they are without, and where they are without, going on and on and on about their background, right? They're usually somewhere doing something clever or intelligent, especially if it's like the male lead or the girl. The writer is many times trying to show where they are, maybe what their relationship is with their parents or their mother or their brother, wherever they are in that moment of their life that will best introduce the reader to the story that is to come. Okay, so we're always going to keep in mind when we're writing the beginning that what we're doing is introducing them to the story. Like, not only us as writers, this is how I write, this is how I see my characters, this is how I this is the best way I think to present my characters to you, the reader. But we're also going to keep in mind that it is the best for the story. So we're going to present our characters to the reader that will keep them interested in the story that is to come. Okay, so when you're thinking about your first pages, maybe you feel like you can't start the novel until you have that perfect first line. Maybe you finish the novel and now you're going back to make sure the beginning is compelling enough. And again, there is something to this, because many times that is the only thing that the agent reads. Many times that is the preview that the reader sees on Amazon. And so I don't want you to think that I'm saying that the beginning is not important. It is important. I just don't think that we talk about it in the correct way. And it's not necessarily a competition between all books and all writers. What it is a competition kind of with the writer themselves within the genre, to see if the readers of that genre approve of the way that the writer is introducing the characters in the story to them. Okay. I just think I'm all for competition in many ways, but I'm not for it if a historical fiction is competing against a thriller for a first line competition. I don't think that is in any way an inspiring competition. Because what thrillers need to do is, within their own genre and within their own niches of their genre, compete with each other. And I also I still don't like, there are wonderful lines, very clever lines that people start with, but you better be able to continue the cleverness throughout the book. Okay, so let me back up a bit. We're talking about, we talked about if you're writing a historical romance and how you might introduce the character. What if you're writing a science fiction novel that the market is for men and who love to know all the details about the thingamabob weapon on your spaceship and how it came to be through this quantum crazy mechanics physics thing? Clearly I'm not a sci-fi writer, but they love the details of it. If that is what they love and that is what you are going to give them within the book, it should show in the beginning of the book. If you are going to bring in chaos theory and quantum leaps theory and physics and black holes, and this can only be like this, the metal can only melt at this temperature on Mars because of all the physics behind it and the chemistry, and you're going to explain this all to your readers because they eat it up, because they love that stuff, then your beginning cannot be clever fluff or whatever it is. Now, of course, if your book tells them about this in a sort of sarcastic tone or a funny tone or whatever, yes, you want to start with that. But you don't want to start the beginning of this book in a way that wins a competition for best fun line, whatever, that then doesn't line up with what the rest of the book is, because that is breaking the social contract, because you're sort of tricking the reader into expecting one thing and then giving them another. Caveat, literary fiction. If you're writing literary fiction, they all claim that the rules change for literary fiction, but I do have to say, the books that frustrate me the most tend to be literary fiction, in which they try to be clever with the beginning and trick me into something that I expect to read and then don't deliver on it. It really bothers me when they do this. And that's not to say that they did it wrong, because many of the books sell like hotcakes. I think of one, like, is it Olive Kitteridge? It really bothered me that they started that book, I can't remember the name of the author, with two characters who did not end up being the main characters at all. And maybe no one else was bothered by that, but I felt like this contract was slanted, and it was that I signed up for something that didn't end up being. Now, on the other hand, it was kind of a short story, and the whole book is basically like a collection of short stories about Olive's life, sort of. So then I kind of go back and forth on that. I can think of a couple more in which the literary writer just it seemed disjointed, the beginning from the rest of the book. I'll just leave it at that. You can definitely tell me what you think about that. But when we're writing genre fiction, more than, signing up for your first line to, win that competition, or your first few pages of your chapter to win with your critique group, think about who your reader is and what your genre is, and what social contract you think that they are going to enjoy the most and not feel tricked into. So it doesn't just introduce, like, the beginning of your story doesn't just introduce the plot, right? It introduces the reader to the character and the journey. It really tells them, kind of leads up to the inciting incident to hint to the reader what kind of journey they're going to be embarking on for the next 300-400 pages. Okay, and as you go forward, you're going to introduce something, the character, probably a couple of these: the character, the world, the rules of the world, the character's role in that world, and sort of hint at the general arc of the plot and the general arc of the character, right? So once you set those up, and once you set them up properly, then you can go back and sort of choose the most clever lines or the most clever way to do all of that, in which you're staying within your social contract to make sure that the reader won't throw your book across the room halfway through it because they feel like you broke the contract. So let's go through a couple books. I have 2 stacks of books here, and of course they are not the only ones in the world, but I thought that I just sort of pulled random books, honestly, off the shelf to see if we can sort of look at them and see what we think about them. So this first one is The Tattooist of Auschwitz. If you don't know it, it is now a Netflix show or movie, I believe. And it was very big. I mean, especially the last few years between kind of 2018 and COVID, World War II was selling like hotcakes, honestly. So we're looking at a historical fiction based on a true story. And it starts with a prologue, a very short prologue. But basically the prologue is giving you a look into his life. I would say like halfway through the book. So it's kind of pulled something. It's giving you a glance into what will become of him. And then the first chapter goes backwards to April 1942. So the prologue does not show the year. Of course, you could if you wanted to, if you're And let's just look really quickly at what it says. Lael tries not to look up. He reaches out to take the piece of paper being handed to him. He must transfer the 5 digits onto the girl who held it. So here we already have the main character and what he's doing in the world, what his role is in this world, that we don't really know. You know, if we didn't know anything about World War II, we don't really know where he is. If we do know something about World War II, we're already getting an idea of what he's doing, right? There is already a number there, but it has faded. So he's like doing it again, possibly. He pushes the needle into her arm, making a 3, trying to be gentle. Blood oozes, but the needle hasn't gone deep enough and he has to trace the number again. She doesn't flinch at the pain. Lael knows he's inflicting. Okay? They've been warned, say nothing, do nothing. He wipes away the blood and rubs green ink into the wound. Hurry up, Pepin whispers. Lael is taking too long. Tattooing the arms of men is one thing. Defiling the bodies of young girls is horrifying. Okay. I honestly think that the social contract is set up already within the first few paragraphs. I think that you're going to have a pretty intense story, probably very sad. And so you wouldn't be surprised, right? If there are really intense moments, really sad moments, something is going really wrong in this world, right? And of course, we're going to have hope for Lyle, but we don't know. Okay. We're just going to, now this one is a New York Times bestseller, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. It is still historical fiction, but it's kind of set up differently. What's interesting about this one is that I think she did quite well with the social contract of telling you what to expect, in the sense that she starts out right away with a fictitious newspaper article. And that's interesting because throughout the book, she does pull out both social media posts, blog posts, and then old newspaper articles about Evelyn Hugo. And so she's already kind of showing you before you read that what kind of, this is the kind of format, like don't be surprised if another news article comes up. And so it's just a news article that says Evelyn Hugo to auction off gowns. So we're being introduced to her in a very unique way. Film legend and 60s it girl Evelyn Hugo has just announced that she will auction off 12 of her most memorable gowns through Christie's to raise money for breast cancer research. Okay, so this lady, Evelyn Hugo, is obviously rich, possibly. You know, I'm trying to think of if you don't know what's going on. She's a film legend, so she's an actress. Sorry, it does say that. An actress, an it girl, very beautiful, most likely, has these beautiful dresses, is going to auction it off, and she's a very good, good-hearted person because she's going to give all the money to breast cancer. Okay, so they go through and they give you a very short bio of her, couple paragraphs down. Born Evelyn Elena Herrera in 1938, the daughter of Cuban immigrants. So we know quite a bit of her already. Hugo grew up in the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood of New York City. By 1955, she had made her way to Hollywood, gone blonde, and been rechristened Evelyn Hugo. All right, so it's a unique way to set it up. We kind of see, this outside view of her. And then the first chapter goes into the second protagonist, main character. I don't know if you would, I think maybe Taylor would consider the lady Monique to be the main character, possibly. And it starts out right away with dialogue. Can you come into my office? I look around the desk behind me and then back at Frankie, trying to confirm who exactly she's talking to. I point to myself. Do you mean me? All right, so we're kind of introduced to 2 different people already, and I think Taylor Jenkins Reid knows what she's doing. The social contract there is, we're going to have 2 people clearly are the main characters of this book. We're not sure how they're going to be interconnected yet, but we know one of them is very famous. Possibly when she says, who, me? Possibly not famous, right? She's going to be a little bit less than that. And we already know the format that Taylor Jenkins Reid has set up, in which she's going to intersperse it with these blog posts, newspaper articles. So I think that was done quite well. It wasn't surprising to us for that to happen. All right, The Fault in Our Stars. Would we consider this YA? I think we would consider this YA. The author's note says, this work is a book of fiction. I made it up. So chapter 1. So even though it's YA, there are no chapter titles, which just me as a reader, I would think that that is more literary. I don't know. So I'm kind of already going to assume that it's not fantasy, not fiction, not sci-fi. It doesn't have those. It may be older YA as well. So late in the winter of my 17th year, my mother decided I was depressed, presumably because I rarely left the house. Interesting. Spent quite a lot of time in bed, read the same book over and over, ate infrequently, and devoted quite a bit of my abundant free time to thinking about death. Well, there you go. So that's quite the interesting and quite compelling first paragraph. We're talking to a young person. We're reading about a young person. They're talking in the first person, and they are introducing us to his mother thinking that he's depressed. And it sounds like they disagree, right? So it's sort of setting this up. And now we look at the next one is whenever you read a cancer booklet or website or whatever, they always list depression among the side effects of cancer. Okay. So within the first few lines, we have the social contract of young person, we're going to be dealing with cancer. And I don't know, it's just me. What do you guys think? Without titles on the chapter, I would assume this might be quite heavy. I don't know why I think that. I think that, and that brings up an interesting case is even still, the reader mind that we have makes up its own sort of part of the social contract, which, side note, as authors, you cannot control. So we cannot control what kind of contract the reader is going to fill in on their behalf. They're signing this contract, right? And it's a little bit unfair because you're trying your best to be honest, right? Not trick them, tell them the genre, introduce them to the characters in the world. And yet you still can't predict how the reader will fill in their side of the contract. And so I could be completely wrong that this is sad or that it is heavy, I've been wrong about some of the fill-ins on my social part of the social contract before, but that's why it's rather difficult it's difficult to tell you, in my opinion, to spend so much time being super clever about the beginning, because you still can't control what the reader is going to do. So now we're going to go to Sally Thorne. This is contemporary romance. She is the author of The Hating Game, but I don't own that book. I pulled this from one of my mini libraries because somebody around here always reads and gets rid of their books. Now it's interesting too, the way, again, the formatting is, the way that she has the font, if you're watching this. Now it's a kind of a fun font for chapter 1. There's, again, no title to the chapter, but the fun font already kind of tells me part of the social contract, this is going to be a fun book. Once again, that is my assumption. And what I'm warning you with that is beware of your fonts. Readers judge the fonts. All right, so nobody taught me this when I first started as a bartender. But luckily, I was a quick learner. Okay, so she's a quick learner. I'm assuming it's the girl. When a group of men are walking in, you should work out which one is the alpha. Okay, already a little funny. If you can handle him, you might get a bit of respect from the rest. Okay, so she has probably had some issues with men as a female bartender. Tonight I can pick him straight away. He's the tallest and best looking with a "you're welcome" gleam in his eye. How predictable. All right, so that font right away has told us that this is going to be a fun book. I think already within 2 chapters, we have a bit of sarcasm from the main character. The main character is a bartender, contemporary. She's sizing men up as they come into the bar to make sure that they treat her in the right way. right? So I think that we can also, as a reader, assume that the tall alpha that she has seen tonight might end up being the other main character, right? Most likely from that. Now, I just want you guys to keep that in mind as you're writing your books. He doesn't necessarily have to be, right? He could be a guy that's a big jerk, and then the main character comes in and saves her from him, or whatever. It doesn't have to be. I'm just trying to show you guys how this social contract is working from the point of view of a reader. All right, Anxious People. I would consider this contemporary literary fiction. Yeah, I think so. Fredrick Backman. I really like this book. I think that you guys should definitely read this book. All right, chapter 1. A bank robbery, a hostage drama, a stairwell full of police officers on their way to storm an apartment. It was easy to get to this point, much easier than you might think. All it took was one single really bad idea. It's pretty compelling, but it doesn't tell you much, actually, right? So we know that it's a robbery, it's a hostage drama. There are police officers, and I think it's this line here. It was easy to get to this point, much easier than you might think. That is the giveaway to me that it's not going to be a thriller. Besides, like, let's not discount the cover and all this, but when you send these into a literary agent, they don't see a cover. So I think it's that line there that tells me this is definitely not a thriller. All it took was one single really bad idea. Okay, like, it could be quite tongue-in-cheek, but we're not sure, actually. And we actually don't know the main character. So let's see if the second paragraph will tell us. This story is about a lot of things, but mostly about idiots. Okay, might be funny, right? And notice the sort of the point of view. The point of view is a bit pulled back. It's not first person. And it almost feels like there's a narrator, right? A narrator that might not be part of the story itself. So it needs saying from the onset that it's always very easy to declare that other people are idiots, but only if you forget how idiotically difficult being human is, especially if you have other people you're trying to be a reasonably good human being for. All right, so I think for me that even those first few paragraphs, I can already tell that it's written in a rather literary way. I would even say a European way, because I read quite a few European authors, and they tend to have this sort of distant narrator telling the story. So that is pretty much up to code. What's interesting about that beginning part is he actually does quite a few different things format wise. So like if you can see this, there are like interview sections in which it kind of goes to like transcript almost, where it says Jack, Roger, and it just sort of says what they're saying. That's for the interviews, and that is not in the beginning. And there are some really, really short chapters where it's just like a line or maybe a paragraph. So that you don't get from the beginning. But I think you do, just with the word use of idiots, you sort of see, well, it's probably going to be rather tongue-in-cheek and entertaining. But that there is a narrator telling that story, you're not going to have that up close and personal character that sometimes American writers are very used to writing. All right, let's look at a thriller. So Tom Clancy, a Jack Ryan novel. So this one, you might assume it's going to be a little bit faster in the beginning, possibly. Oh, he even lists out all of his characters. There must be a lot of characters in this one. All right, now even still, like, the font on this one is very blocky. I just, you start looking at these different things. So the social contract here. Dr. Patty Moon sat bolt upright in her plastic deck chair, startled at the sudden noise coming across her headset. The biting wind blowing off the Chukchi sea? I don't know. Didn't realize it was spring and pinked her round cheeks and smallish nose. Okay, so we already know that it's spring and Dr. Patty Moon is there in a plastic deck chair with a headset. Apart from her hands, which she needed to work the Toughbook portable computer, her face was the only part of her not bundled in layers of wool or fleece. So it's cold. Dr. Moon leaned toward the folding table situated on the afterdeck of the research vessel, Sikuliak, straining to hear the noise again. Sikuliak was Inupiaq, which is a native language for young ice. Okay, appropriate for a science vessel capable of traveling through more than 2 feet of the stuff. All right, so this is a bit of what I had said before. This is most likely going to be quite full of scientific detail. Okay, so while this is a thriller, scientific detail in the sense of like military detail. All right, we're looking at this. Tom Clancy is telling us the definition of this research vessel, which I assume is a boat. I don't know why I assume that, but that's what I assume it is. Because it can travel through 2 feet of ice. So I'm going to assume, reading this, that there's going to be quite a lot of explaining the instruments and the vehicles and all of that stuff, most likely because this is Tom Clancy, it's a Jack Ryan novel, and the audience tends to be men who were once in the military. How do I know that? Because I listened to Tom talk one time. And that's his readership, and so they expect certain things from him. Who wrote Jurassic Park? One of them wrote Jurassic Park, one of these famous guys. Anyway, it has a lot of chaos theory in it, and people still eat it up. So if those are your readers, introduce it right away. And just like Tom Clancy did, we're going to give some definitions here, not in a boring way, but this is what it's called, this is what it means, and good thing too that it fits it perfectly because it's going to, plow through the ice. Perfect, right? We already have this social contract set up. Now, what we wouldn't want is for that to start the book and then it become more like a Sally Rooney book or a Fredrick Backman book, in which it kind of gets silly and tongue-in-cheek and sarcastic and about the relationship between the scientists and the polar bears or something. That's not really the social contract that's being written. All right, and so my last one, oh no, I have 2 more. This is Caraval. All right, so we're going to go into fantasy. The very beginning is just 1 line. It took 7 years to get the letter right. Okay, that doesn't tell us very much. But most people who are fantasy readers are going to find that interesting, and they're going to turn the page. And then for 7 pages, it is letters. So they are using the format that way too. All right, so for 7 pages is letters, and she's getting no answer. And then on the very 8th page, she gets an answer that says, I cannot, pretty much that they cannot, the performance cannot come to her island, and that their next one is invitation only. But if she can leave her island, if Scarlett can leave her island, then she is invited to this festival. And so I would assume from that the book is going to be about her either trying to leave the island or leaving the island to go see the performance. I'm going to assume that. I don't know if that's going to happen. I actually haven't read that one yet. It's next on my TBR. It's okay. So one more. If you guys haven't read the Violin Conspiracy, this is literary historical fiction. Let's see how this, so literary, again, I told you that people tend to be a little bit more clever than sometimes works out for them. I don't know. All right, so this one, actually, the chapter has a title called Day 1, White Chucks, size 10.5. So we're talking about shoes. On the morning of the worst, most earth-shattering day of Ray McMillan's life, he ordered room service. Scrambled eggs for 2, 1 side of regular bacon for Nicole, 1 side of vegan sausage for him, 1 coffee for Nicole, 1 orange juice for him. Later, he would try to second-guess those choices and 1,000 others that, in hindsight, vibrated in his memory. What if he'd ordered French toast instead of eggs? What if grapefruit juice instead of orange? What if no juice at all? All right. So because this is historical and it's a bit of a mystery because he's looking for I haven't finished this one. I haven't read this one either for the violin. So we're being told that somehow something has happened. It's his earth-shattering worst day, right? And so he's trying to understand if what he had chosen every step of the way would have changed the outcome, right? So we're kind of being told that he has a partner, maybe, I would assume. He's vegan, maybe. That he's about to embark on the worst day of his life, and he is questioning if he could have changed it. Hey, pretty compelling, right? But see how they're all different, and they're all compelling in a different way because of what we expect from them and what they're giving us, right? I'm not sure that it would have worked here. All he ordered was sort of just one line here and then a turn of the page. If he had only ordered the French toast, maybe this wouldn't have happened. I don't know. It could work. What I want you guys to think about is when you go back to that first page, understand what you are trying to do and who you are trying to impress. I hope that what you're trying to do is impress your readers, and the readers specifically who love your genre, your ideal reader, and have this open-ended conversation with them on what would they like from the contract, keeping in mind you cannot control how they fill in their part of the contract, what they're kind of assuming it is, but knowing that you have to give them this intro to your book, the characters, the place, the time, that's going to continue throughout the rest of the book. So even if you have a really amazing, interesting beginning that everyone says is oh so clever and oh so entertaining, if you cannot keep that up for the entire story, it's a broken contract. Okay? And maybe it would be best for a short story, or you're going to have to keep working on the story. So the beginning contract should be telling the reader what genre you're writing, who the characters are, where they are in the world. You're going to choose a couple of these. The world itself. You're going to promise them basically that this is how you write, and that you're going to continue that type of writing, and that you're not trying to trick them at all into this. So we saw, Tom Clancy being very kind of scientifically detailed in the vessel that this scientist is on and the tools that she's using. We've seen people being interesting with their formatting, using letters or newspapers. And it really had nothing as much to do with the words in that sense for Caraval or for Evelyn Hugo, but really sort of setting up the feel that the reader is going to get, right? And then we have the Fredrick Backman giving us sort of this distant narrator talking a bit tongue-in-cheek. We have a young person talking very seriously about cancer and trying to tell us that maybe his mother is wrong. We don't know yet, right? So everyone is doing this differently, and I can't say that one is better than the other. I think they're all well done because they stuck with the contract. The rest of the story stuck with that. They didn't try to trick anyone, and that is why people kept turning the pages, right? So there's a lot more to this than just getting that one-liner or that one paragraph that is just oh so amazing. If you can't keep it up with the story, it's not so amazing anymore, because you're going to still get people who will put your book down. But if you are struggling to get that oh so amazing paragraph and amazing meaning that it's perfect for your book and your story, think about how is the best way to take what your voice and your writing and the story that you've written and bring it all sort of wrapped up in an introduction, the best way to introduce this story to the reader. You can pull it from the middle, like some of the historical fictions do. You can talk about sort of introducing what they're dealing with, right? So you don't have to go for just that perfect line. What you have to do is introduce the reader properly to your writing, your characters, the story that your character is about to embark on, and giving the reader the proper expectations that will be fulfilled throughout the rest of the 300 pages. Does that make sense? Before we go, I want to also tell you the best beginning might be written once you've finished the draft. Okay, so if you are waiting for the perfect line to write, I would encourage you to stop doing that and to not be so precious with the way in which you think you have to write, but to give yourself the freedom to explore the story and trust that you are a good enough writer and a talented enough writer that the perfect beginning to your story will come the more that you explore the characters and their journey. Okay, so I would encourage you to actually start writing and allow that perfect beginning place to be held in sort of a tandem. You just hold it there and continue to write the story, and that the beginning will come to you. And I think it will come to you better once you know the full journey of your character. All right. If you guys enjoyed that, I hope that you enjoyed that. Let me know. I'm willing to do a little bit more digging into things. I am working on a background episode, which might turn into 2, because I want to give you guys examples of what I'm talking about instead of just giving you theory, because I think that is more interesting and more will stick with you more, and maybe you'll understand it more. But if you hated this format, let me know as well. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter, X, whatever. I almost call it Z, whatever. You can sign up for my writer's newsletter, my reader's newsletter. That always, every reply that you make there goes directly to my email. I'm on Instagram at @Caldwell_writing. Or you can find me at author_Cat Caldwell if you want to talk to me about my books there. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. Let me know what you think about writing the beginning of your novels, and maybe you have a favorite beginning. I would love to know about that as well. You guys can find me on Substack, and that is also a really great way to have a conversation if you love Substack. But otherwise, I will see you guys next week. We are about to roll out quite a few different interviews, and I think that you guys are really going to enjoy them. So I will see you then.